Hey guys, my name is Alex, and this is the 20th installment, the long-belated 20th installment in my video project series Thing Kingly Endeavors, in which I intend to read all of Stephen King's novels in chronological order and to hopefully post a video a week about it. I read Gerald's Game, full disclosure, like 3 months ago. But yeah, I wanted to get back on track with the series, and I figured Gerald's Game is kind of a good place to do that because a major factor in Gerald's Game, apart from all of like the horror and the intrigue and everything, is like the theme of confronting yourself. It's about a woman named Jessie Burlingame who... Burlingame? She's having some kind of sexual game bondage thing with her husband. He handcuffs her to a bed and she decides in the middle of the process that she's really not up for it. He won't relent, he won't uncuff her, and so she kicks him in the chest and accidentally kills him. So she's by herself, no one can hear her scream, whatever, so the whole book is about her trying to sort of free herself from this Christ-like cuffed situation. Now, the last book on the list was Needful Things. Needful Things, as I mentioned, is like the first full novel that Stephen King wrote after he got sober. And that book, even though it's really imaginative and it's got some really cool things in there, it's kind of a failure. Needful Things is only going to be of real interest to people who are already diehard Stephen King fans and they just kind of want to see what it's like when he goes astray. So the story of Gerald's Game is extremely simple. It's just about this character trying to get free of her bindings on the bed, but then there's the craft question of like, how do you substantiate a 350-page novel with such a simple story? But I think this is one of the interesting opportunities where you can distinguish between plot and story. I guess the plot of the story is that here's this woman, she's handcuffed to a bed, she's out in the middle of nowhere, no one knows that she's there might be some predator encroaching, and she's got to get free. In contrast to what the plot is, the story is about her different efforts to like get a glass of water up to her lips so that she doesn't like die of dehydration. The story is also about like the myriad failed efforts to get away. And it's very often the case when you're a storyteller that simplicity is like the best route to take, but there are certain instances in which like it can just be too simple and it's not enough to really like substantiate what you're doing. So when the plot is very simple and the little episodes in the story are very simple, you then need to have kind of a more complicated and substantive theme that's fueling it along. And I'll stop trying to like clarify or justify why I'm so hung up on the addiction aspect of Stephen King's work, but that's the route we're going here. I think that the theme in Gerald's Game is confrontation. I mean, obviously there's the confrontation with like the creature that seems to be encroaching on the cabin where she's tied up. There's the very disastrous and graphic confrontation that she has with her husband when she's sort of handcuffed there laying before him and she's kind of like at his mercy. But really the most pressing manifestation of confrontation? The most pressing kind of confrontation that we see in the book is the confrontation of self. When Jessie Burlingame is sort of shackled up to this bed, she's kind of just all throughout the book in dialogue with herself. And it would be boring if it was kind of just 300 pages of a stream of consciousness narration of what she's doing at that moment. There's a foil for her character, and that is the good wife Burlingame. It's kind of this Stepford wife mentality that exists in her head and criticizes her for thinking a certain way or for having taken a certain course of action that would be considered unladylike or indecorous or whatever. But along with being very concerned with manners, that good wife, Stepford wife voice in her head is also very concerned with like pretending that ugly things don't happen. I guess it's the manifestation of that part of your psyche that wants to just kind of suppress every horrible thing that you do or that has been done to you. So for Jessie, it requires like she has to confront some things that happened to her in her past in order to like get free of what she like. The metaphor is a little heavy-handed, I think, when you look at it that way. But then if you want to take a step back and assume sort of like the biographical perspective that I've been using throughout this series, we can see that like here's the second full novel that Stephen King has written while sober after a very prosperous career of writing while he was fucked up on cocaine and guzzling bottles of mouthwash. And so the situation in which Jessie finds herself is kind of the situation in which the novelist finds him or herself. The only personalities with whom you're having an active, constant discourse are the personalities that already exist inside you. He is kind of in conversation with himself and he's forcing himself. I don't know. Sometimes I start talking about the addiction thing and I feel like I'm being way too presumptuous. So yeah, I think it's a good book. It's really enjoyable, but it's kind of a beach read, I guess. It's a little too long for what it is. I think it could easily be trimmed by like, I don't know, 50, 60 pages. But that's a huge step up from like fucking Pet Sematary or Needful Things, both of which, and there are other Stephen King books that could be trimmed easily by like 150 pages. What's really interesting about Gerald's Game, I think, from that biological perspective, What's really interesting about Gerald's Game, I think, from that biographical perspective, is not just the idea that, like, this is Stephen King, or this is the addict author confronting the addictive personality. I think what's also interesting about it is the prose is really strong, the story is really well told, it's a little long-winded, but other than that, it's a good time. So it shows that the author is getting in touch with that thing from which he always thought he would be estranged once he gave up booze, which is the muse. I think Gerald's Game is the first step toward us seeing that sober Stephen King does end up becoming a stronger writer than sort of drug-addled Stephen King. But also to sort of like step back a little and sort of assess why did it take me so long, like confront myself as to why has it taken me so long to like get back in front of the camera and finish this series. I'm like juggling a bunch of different projects and like I'm finishing up another book that I wrote and I'm trying to send it out to agents by August. I started the 1000movieproject, about which I've vlogged a little bit, but mostly it's just kind of being chronicled on thousandmovieproject.com. I quit a job that was very demanding, and in the wake of having quit that job and having sort of saved up enough money to afford myself 6 months of devoting my life completely to writing. I don't know if it's like I'm trying to compensate for the fact that I'm not like clocking in at a 9 to 5, and so I'm assuming all these projects and responsibilities. But I don't know, there is definitely this feverish like, okay, commit to this and then move on to this and I'll come back to the first thing. Now definitely I'm gonna try to focus myself and like finish this project, which doesn't have a whole lot of work left to be done, and of course it's very enjoyable work. All these books, as weird as they sometimes get, as indulgent as they sometimes are, I always end up enjoying them. And of course I very much enjoy editing the videos and posting the videos and interacting with you guys, so yeah, let's get back on track with that. So forgive me if this video is a little strange and I'm sort of like out of my element, but like it's I feel so awkward in approaching the camera again. I brought out these handcuffs that I just happen to have, and I was like, oh, let me do a shtick with the handcuffs. But then I was like, no, because then someone's gonna be like, oh, why do you have handcuffs? And I'm gonna have to like not answer that question. But anyways, yeah, so this is just sort of like to give a little run through of Gerald's Game, get back on track, and just sort of like say hello. So yeah, that's it. Constant Reader, thanks for watching.